Well, I'm going to start with a story. And this was back in my junior year of college. My buddies and I were actually just about to break into our high school football stadium's press box and drink some beer, because that's what kids and I would do. And just as we were about to do this, I got a phone call from Drew Kitts, who was the equipment manager of the local professional hockey team, asking me if I was back in town from break. Their goalie had just been called up to the AHL, and they needed a goalie for the weekend. So needless to say, I did not drink that night. But the next morning, I woke up. I immediately went to the team doctor, got a physical. I walked into the locker room. I signed a league minimum $400 a week contract. Was handed a wad of cash for my per diem on the road, loaded a sleeper bus, and we headed down to St. Louis, where I got to dress in 2 professional hockey games. Unfortunately, I did not get to see any game action that weekend, but a couple of weeks later, this came in the mail, which is 3/7 of that $400 because I was only actually on the roster for 3 days. But as students recently pointed out to me the other day, because I didn't know this, I'm apparently listed online as a retired professional hockey goalie, which is how I expect to be referred to from now on and how I'm going to introduce myself. But so this whole story kind of begs the question of how does that guy become a professional hockey goaltender? Because this is me in South Mississippi. This was just after I moved from South Mississippi, right? I'm not a hockey person. My parents didn't play hockey. My parents really weren't even athletic in any way. And I didn't even touch ice hockey until I moved to Iowa after Hurricane Katrina. So how did that happen? And I've really got to owe it to my mom and the messaging that she barraged me with growing up as a kid. And this started with little inspirational messages in my napkins when I was in elementary school, up through like pep talks and speeches while I was in high school. When I was in middle school, or in elementary school, she bought this poster, and she made me read it every single day. And it starts out by saying, when life leaves you hanging, don't quit. Anything can happen. Bend, don't break. Challenge your potential. Destiny's a choice. And it goes on, and I still have this thing memorized. This is still hanging on the wall in my parents' house in Iowa. It managed to survive Hurricane Katrina. And if you think my mom has changed in any way, these are just some texts from the past year. And so this continues, right? This is the messaging that I live with. And as annoying as I find this, even to this day, I realize that I wouldn't be where I am without it. I wouldn't have become a professional hockey player without this constant messaging, right? Because most of the goalies that I played against were 6 foot tall, or 6 foot or taller. I'm 5'9". My brother's 6'4", but of course he got the good genes. But instead, for me, it was up to hard work and believing in myself and listening to my mom and never quitting. And clearly the messages that she was giving to me were that of a growth mindset. But I had no idea what that was, at least not until my first year here at Senn, which was 2 years ago. I went to a network PD for the math network, and I learned about growth mindset as an instructional tool. And immediately it resonated with me because of the success that growth mindset, the impact growth mindset has had on my life. And I immediately knew that this was something that I wanted to do in my classroom. However, as a first and a second year teacher, my main priority was trying to go to bed before 2 a.m. on most nights, which I still kind of suck at. I think last night I went to bed at like 1:30, so I'm getting better. But it was at the end of last year when we found out that this book was going to be a topic of study that I got excited that this was finally going to be that push to do this in my classroom. And the chapter was that my TED Talk, my Senn Talk is chapter 2, Everyone Can Learn. And in that chapter it talks about how to begin to introduce your students to growth mindset. And aside from telling you to play the song The Climb by Miley Cyrus, because that's a growth mindset song, it also gave a whole lesson plan about how you can do that. Instead of the whole lesson plan, I opted to do a team building. And I asked my students if they agreed or disagreed with the following statements. Some people are just naturally good at math. I've never been good at math, therefore I will never be good at math, and anything is possible with hard work. And I had students think about these questions, I had them share out amongst their team, and then we had a whole class discussion where I just stood back and acted as a facilitator because I just wanted to listen to what beliefs my students were bringing into my classroom. And at the end of this discussion, we did talk about what growth mindset is. So I gave them definitions of growth mindset and fixed mindset. And we talked about the importance of approaching learning with a growth mindset. We acknowledge the fact that many of the students in my classroom have had some sort of negative experience or history with learning mathematics. So we talked about how we can change that through hard work, through persistence, through believing in their ability to become mathematicians and to see themselves as that. We talked about how to approach challenging questions rather than backing off. We talked about different approaches you can take. I followed this up at parent night by speaking to the parents that I saw and telling them, if you're trying to help your student with homework and you're struggling, one thing not to say is do not say I'm not a math person. Right? I wasn't a hockey person, but I talked about other helpful things to do instead, other resources to go to. Now, in my classes this year, the change that I've seen, and I'm going to compare directly my 2 honors algebra classes that I taught last year compared with the 3 honors algebra classes I taught this year. And part of the reason why I'm just focusing on those classes is because they are a mixture of students from all 3 of our programs. We have DPP students, we have art students, and we have design students. And many of these students do not see themselves as math people, right? That's not how they would classify themselves. And last year, without this focus, when I would give students challenging work, or sometimes even with not challenging work, you would hear students say things like, I can't do this. This is too hard. I suck at math. But this year, following from the growth mindset work that I've done, I hear students say things like, well, maybe if I try it this way, or maybe I don't know this yet, but I will. And these are actually things I hear kids say. I got this email 2 weeks ago from a student about a student who was not happy with where her grade currently was, but last year you got an email like this, it might say something like, hey, my grade's a D, give me a B, right? But she says, I feel that I can do better. I'm willing to put in the work to improve myself. And she's focused not on necessarily a specific grade, but she's focused on improving herself. And I noticed this attitude in my classes this year, where students are excited to learn math. They're excited to get better. They believe that they can be mathematicians, and their attitudes and beliefs in the classroom reflect that. Now, I believe that giving our students a growth mindset is one of the most powerful things that we can do as educators. Studies have shown that in more affluent communities, students are more easily able to recognize their potential simply because of their lived experiences. However, if we think about our students, right, think about the narrative, and I'm a bit of an outsider because I've only been in the city for 2.5 years. The general narrative is that city kids fail, right? That our black students won't make it. That our refugees, our immigrants, our EL students aren't welcome here. Last year, I was back in Iowa, and my friend's dad told me, I'm just a city teacher, right? Implying that my job isn't as important as teachers in other schools. That our kids don't matter as much as those kids. And so the world is just hurling these fixed mindset messages of, you're not going to make it, to our students. And we don't know that there's anyone out there talking to our kids about positive messaging, about getting them to believe in themselves. That might just be us. And so somebody's got to make our students believe. Somebody's got to give our students the ability to believe in themselves and to let them know that if they work hard, they can accomplish anything. And obviously we have to acknowledge that our students' starting point in life was probably very different than what our own starting point was. But we've got the potential, and we've got to know that if we can make our students believe in themselves the way my mom made me believe in myself, that we have the power to change their lives. Thank you.